Hey, everybody. Welcome to Navel Gazing, the Valley Indie podcast. My name is Eugene Driscoll, and this week, my guest is Justin Farmer, a Democrat running to represent the 17th State Senate District, which includes Ansonia, Beacon Falls, Bethany, Derby, Hamden, Naugatuck, and Woodbridge. Welcome to the program, Justin.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Definitely my pleasure. So you're one of two candidates looking to challenge Republican incumbent state Senator George Logan. The other Democrat is Jorge Cabrera, and a primary between these two candidates is scheduled for August 11th. So before we begin, I'll blab on for like 5 minutes because that's what I do. I don't cover state government. I'm like that guy in Clerks. I'm not even supposed to be here today. You know, the Valley Independent Sentinel is a one-person operation. I concentrate mainly on Ansonia, Derby, and Seymour. I only say all that because I try to do what I can to cover state politics. But then usually I get into a situation, I'll do a podcast and a politician or candidate will say something that goes completely over my head, and I'm subjected to torture on Twitter for like the next 2 weeks. So I'm just throwing that out there right now. But the fact that there's a primary next week and there's two candidates and it involves my coverage area, I just wanted to have you on, Justin, to sort of get to know you a little bit and to talk a little bit about the issues. We all participated in a debate a week or two ago. It seems like the way things are, it was 100 years ago. But if anybody wants to go back and listen to that, there's plenty of policy stuff there. And we'll touch upon a little bit of that today. But again, my main focus is to try to, get to know Justin a little bit. But before I begin, and then I'm going to shut up, I just want to read an important announcement. COVID-19 has changed life as we know it, and the Valley needs your help now more than ever. The region's health and human service providers face unprecedented challenges in meeting the needs of those affected by this pandemic. Some organizations are even at the risk of closing their doors. You can make a difference right now in our community by joining with others in 3 ways. 1, give directly to Valley nonprofits. 2, participate in the Valley United Way's annual campaign. Or 3, support the Valley Community COVID-19 Response and Recovery Fund. Please, for more information, go to valleyfoundation.org. All right, that's that. I just try to get that in there. It's a really important cause because it's a cliche at this point, but we are all in this together. So that's that. So, Justin, I wanted to ask you, first of all, in this age of COVID, how are you even campaigning? How does one campaign? Because I know door to door is whenever I talk to anybody running for office, they're always like, it's all door to door, got to go door to door. Can't really go door to door when there's a pandemic happening. So what's going on?
So we were under the, probably around a month and a half ago, as the numbers were dropping, we decided to go door to door. What we do is mask, gloves, people step 6 feet away from the door. We hang the hanger, knock on the person's door, step back 6 feet, 8 feet. And if a person comes, great. If they're just like, I'm busy right now, I'm like, cool. I don't want to give you COVID or anything. I'm keeping my distance. You take that, the air particles. I wasn't around your door long enough to give you anything. So you can take it and move safely and freely. So that's what we've been doing recently. Phone calls. It's been wonderful. We have a lot of youth helping out on the campaign. So out of the 20,000 registered Dems in the Valley, we have called everyone at least once, some people twice, some people more accidentally, because you have households that have multiple people. So we apologize for that. It's not overzealous. It's just, we're trying to make sure we reach every voter. And then
it's got to feel weird though, because with it, like this whole, is it strange? I mean, you've run campaigns locally before. You've been a candidate because you're on the Legislative Council in Hamden. And you seem like a people person. I don't know you that well at all, but that's just my impression of you from watching you in a debate. Is it just weird to be campaigning in this. And are people even paying attention? I mean, I'm freaking out about sending my kids to school. There's a tropical storm coming. Is it more difficult to just get people to focus on this primary?
I would say so, where, there's been some people who've been very excited for months about the campaign. And then there are people who literally just before I got on with you, a community member who lives just down the street from me, I talked to her maybe 3 weeks ago about issues, how things were going, so on and so forth. And she's like, I just realized you're running. I was like, yeah. She said, but you didn't mention it. I'm like, oh, I just thought you knew. Hey, we can talk about it. I'm like, I hope you can vote for me. But yeah, no, there's a lot going on with everyone's lives that in many ways, this election is more important than other elections. This election season, between this year's primaries and this year's general election, these are probably the most important elections in a decade. And a lot of people have that feeling in 2016, but we have 150,000 people who've died in our country. We have businesses. I just saw someone earlier today on Instagram where they just started a business, cutting people's hairs, a hair salon, and, their client has their face mask on and they're trying to get people to feel that it's safe to come back and well, not come back, but start new clientele in their first business. There is so much going on where it has been hard in some cases, even every day, even yesterday. There's people, I knocked on people's doors yesterday to talk to. They're like, oh, I didn't know an election was happening. And then there are other people who are like, yeah, I've been following you on Instagram for 4 months. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, they're like, yeah, we're Instagram friends. Or, oh, yeah, we follow each other on Twitter. I'm like, oh, that's your handle. So it's not as personal as elections usually are. But the issues are so much more personal when you think about it.
And let me allow to push a narrative on you, right? Everyone loves to use that phrase. And again, I'm just an observer who just is following the news. So it's not original reporting here I'm doing, aside from, talking to some Derby and Ansonia Democrats. But you're a candidate. I would hazard to say that you're more progressive than Jorge Cabrera. And we're seeing this play out all over the country where you have maybe a Democrat who's more centrist, although Cabrera's not an incumbent at this point, but he did run last time. But, is that narrative correct? Is that how you, and the fact you said during the debate, I think you said you're 25 years old and you're one of the older people on your campaign. Is that what you had said?
Yeah, I am. I offended some people. So I actually am the 8th oldest person. I said I was the 6th. So I'm actually
okay.
There's a couple of people, there's 2 people I didn't think of who are part of the core team who are a couple of years older than me. But last week I turned 26 and
happy birthday.
Thank you. And I actually am one of the older people on my campaign, which is kind of crazy when you think about it.
And so this is a youth grassroots movement that's happening right now. I mean, that's essentially is that correct? Is that I don't want to okay.
Internally, I've gotten from texts from interns and stuff like, okay, boomer. I'm like, I'm 5 years older than you.
That's hilarious. One thing I wanted to ask when I do talk to sort of Derby and Ansonia Democrats, not formally, not really on the record, just it comes up in passing. There is a sense that, well, Jorge Cabrera ran against Senator Logan 2 years ago and lost by a very thin margin. And that in local politics or even state politics, there's sort of this gentleman's agreement where, well, he gets another chance because, excuse me as my headphones fall off, because he came so close, Democrats should clear the way and let him have another go at it. So what is motivating you to challenge Cabrera in a primary, since he's the officially endorsed party candidate?
So it was 77 votes. I would argue that's not close. This is a party dominant district. There's 20% more Democrats in this district than Republicans. The independents, you have some independents that are right leaning, but more of them are in the middle. It was the year of the blue wave. Jahana Hayes got inaugurated in. Like, you had all this energy all across the country. AOC, Ilhan, everyone was excited. We got to do better. Everyone, all that energy. I had worked on a primary. I was helping Sean Grace. After Sean lost, our campaign went and helped the Cabrera campaign. Election night, I was there. In one of his videos, you can literally see me there. I was there all night helping the Cabrera campaign. And for me, where we are now, I'm just like, we can't get along to go along. And Sonia had
explain that to me. Explain that when you said we can't just go along to get along.
Well, because you have a lot of people who say, well, people in the Valley are more moderate, and a progressive message, you're forcing that on them. They're not prepared for that. They're not about that. Like, that very well may be true, but we have to speak our truth. That's what politics is all about, is people hearing you out. I'm like, cool. My truth might not be your truth, but at the very least, I should have the ability to say to people. I had someone say to me, Justin, you have no idea what it's like in our community, where there's harassment by officials, where people are dealing with systemic generational poverty. There's drug addiction. There is housing insecurity. There is violence. People have been killed several blocks from my house. You have no idea what it's like. I'm just like, oh, cool. Well, I live 6 houses from New Haven in Newhallville, where I've grown up with generational poverty. The childhood home I grew up in literally sunk into the ground because it was built on a brownfield. Many of the brownfields that exist in Ansonia and Derby. I've seen people die around the block from my house. I've seen people deal with addiction and homelessness. So I'm just like, housing insecurity, transportation insecurity. So I'm like, cool, tell me how my lived experience is different from yours. And it's pushing back on people to say, cool, I get there's a cultural difference, but right now, where we are as a nation, as a country, as a community, we need to talk about it. There's 2 police shootings in this district. More than any other senatorial district in the state of Connecticut, there's 2 police shootings, in Ansonia and in Hamden. And most of the leaders were silent. A year later, we're having national protests talking about these things. I was there on the front line. We had a tornado. People knew they were going to rerun. I was there for the communities. Part of that is I'm on the Legislative Council, but I was there for my community in the aftermath of a tornado. We can't just do the things where we don't want to say anything to piss anyone off. I'm like, the stakes are too high. And it's amazing to have so many young people feel inspired and get involved. But a lot of us are getting disillusioned about politics. As someone who's helped the party and gone all around the state, I'm like, cool, people don't want to talk about the urban issues and my issues. My backside has been in Glastonbury and Norfolk and East Granby and East Haddam and Kent and all these places to work for the party to bring about our message and our values. And we gerrymandered this district to have 2 separate communities who have very similar issues, and we pit them against each other. And this campaign is like, listen, that's over. I don't care if you're from Derby. If you have the same issues as me, we're going to work on it. And I'm not going to scapegoat and say, we either need to care about poor white people or we need to care about poor Black people. Because when we have Greenwich, the 3rd richest place on the planet, there's no reason why it has to be either you or me. And I think that is the issue of why I've decided to run, where I'm just like, listen, whether the Democratic Party likes me running or not, this is the conversation that we're having nationally, which is the activists, the people on the ground, the people who've been doing the work, the people who've been grinding, the Charlie Bookers, incumbent elected officials who've been doing the work, being told, no, step aside. We have someone who's more moderate and more centrist, who isn't necessarily willing to have the hard conversations, but we feel we can win back the seat. What's the point of winning the seat if you can't change the conversation?
And let me just ask you. Well, I'm getting some feedback there. That might have been, I don't know what that was, but all right. So in terms, the other thing that I've heard, and I'm talking about Derby and Ansonia specifically, and I'm sorry to be biased to those
Hey,
communities, but it's where I live and it's where I report on. I know nothing about anything else. The other thing that I hear is like, well, Justin's not coming into our community. He's not. There's this, and maybe it's this Hamden versus Derby or Hamden versus the Valley thing that I'm learning a little bit about. That I guess is this sort of really in the weeds political stuff. But there's a feeling that, well, he's just concentrating on Hamden. He's not really putting any value into Democrats in Derby and Sonia. And they're saying like, well, George is here all the time. Every time we turn around, he's at one of our community events. Is that a fair assessment? How would you react to that?
I'd categorize it as not a fair assessment. We knew that was going to be a narrative that has been pushed. I have spent more time in Naugatuck, Beacon Falls, Derby, and Sonia than I have in Hamden. And that's just a fact. I, as a candidate, have spent more time outside of the own immediate community that I live in to make it clear to people that I'm going to put in that time. For maybe a month and a half, every Sunday, I'd go down to Beacon Falls and hang out with people and wave at people as they were passing by to say that hate has no home here, that we're all in this together. I don't need to spend my time saying where George isn't and is, because if you see me, my track record, I have a track record of being everywhere. So I'm like, there are going to be some people who feel that I'm not spending enough time, but I know from our canvassing effort, from our door knocking effort, we've put more paid canvassers. I've put more time into Ansonia and Derby than anywhere else. And if people don't feel that, that's understandable, because these are communities that have been generationally neglected. As a person who lives in the southern part of Hamden, that is close to New Haven, that in the last 3 weeks, I've had 3 shootings in my community, 2 a couple of blocks around from my house. Cool, I'm the elected official over there, and I don't feel I'm over in my community enough. And I don't feel like the other elected officials are over there enough. And that's what happens when you have people neglected for generations. So I don't fault anybody for saying, you're not over here enough, because I'm like, cool, you need extra attention. But in terms of the narrative that I'm not over there enough compared to George, when people have meetings and events and stuff and they don't say anything and they want to be gatekeepers, I don't mind. It's my job to figure it out. It's my job to earn your trust. So when you have ribbon cuttings with Lamont going down there and everyone can stand down there, that's great. That's fine. But, Hamden's also 37% of the district. When we're talking about people who've been generationally neglected, I am not going to do the same thing that we're always told, where you either care about them or you care about them. So when the majority of the district is the town I live in and I don't see George, when I'm in Naugatuck and I don't see George, the second largest community, and then you have Ansonia and Derby, I'm like, the third and fourth largest communities, yeah, we need to pay attention to all of them. But I've also been spending a lot of time in Beacon Falls that has the least amount of people.
Are you kind of blocked out to a certain, and I'll move on because I don't want to,
Sorry.
it's probably not the, no. It's not you at all. But I'm sort of fascinated by this, but maybe it's too inside baseball, because you had mentioned like Lamont came down for ribbon cutting in Ansonia, and there are these events where a lot of politicians will show up. Are you saying you're sort of boxed? I mean, I guess it's not a stretch to imagine that you're not being told of all these things. Does that happen?
Yeah, which until I earn enough people's trust, I'm going to be left out of those conversations because they don't feel that I'm their guy. But that's the point of running a primary. I want to be our guy. So when I prove it, either people will be upset and will move forward through the primary, and I'm going to have to prove over the next 2 years I'm the person, or they're going to say, cool, you won the primary, let's move on, let's make sure we win back this seat. But up until then, that's the expectation. I was the outsider in my community. I ran in a primary. I won by 23 votes. I turned 23 the month before I won, 4 votes over a mandatory recount. 2.5 years later, for the last 2 election cycles, I'm the highest vote getter in my town. You have to earn people's trust.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to get into also is sort of your background and where you're from. I thought during that debate, I've been a reporter for too long at this point. It's, I don't know, 21 years or something like that. And I thought you gave like the greatest answer. I don't even remember what my question was, so I'll probably mess this. It was like this. It was like, hey, Justin, you don't have a chance type of thing. You know what I mean? And you said something along the line of, I'm a black man with a disability. I can do anything, which I thought was quite an answer. So I wanted to talk about, if you would, and again, if people want to hear more policy, there is a whole debate that Justin did that you can listen to. And there's also, he's been on New Haven Radio with the New Haven Independent, WNHH. So, but anyway, I want to talk about where you grew up and how because you call yourself, you're an activist politician. Where does that come from? So how many brothers and sisters you have, mom and dad, what they do for a living? Tell me some of that.
I am the youngest of 5.
Hey, me too.
The second youngest is 11 years older than me. And
oh, wow.
And the oldest is a little over 2 years shy of being twice my age.
All right, so let me interrupt right there. So is that like, because I have 4 older brothers. One is closer, but it was really like growing up with 4 fathers. Was it like that? Was it sort of you had?
Oh, yeah, it is. I remember as young as like probably 19, where it's just like, when you get a mortgage and the things that you need to think about, I'm like, bro, I'm 19. like, what do you mean a mortgage? Like, I'm not at that level of life yet to think about those type of things, or like being 8. And it's just like, my mom is just like, don't you think about stealing my car and going joyriding and, hanging out with your friends, da 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 da. And I'm like, hold up, does she mean like Hot Wheels or like the car? I'm like, I'm 8 or 9. I don't think I'm gonna take the car, like the car. What would I do with the
You're
car?
paying for the sins of the older ones. Yeah. That's funny. So like, when did you? What was it like? What was your situation growing up?
So my family immigrated to America a decade before I was born. My family's originally from Jamaica. I'm the only American born. Most of my family got nationalized while I was growing up. So I was probably like 13 or 14 when my last sibling became a US citizen. So I had mixed documentation in my family my whole entire life, where there was at least one person who was not a citizen, while I, just being born here, was a citizen, and realizing that. Early 90s, community I grew up in New Haven, my first year I was born, my family lived in East Rock in New Haven. And as the area got gentrified, we were forced to move around and hop around and chase rent. And we ended up on the borderline of Hamden and New Haven. The childhood house I grew up in, it sunk into the ground because it was built on faulty foundation.
And you mentioned that incident a lot. That's the second time you brought it up in this interview. What impact did that? Was that like sort of the beginning of your awakening to politics? The fact that your
so
house.
Many ways, yeah. My whole community. I remember my childhood where there was a lot of violence, drugs, needles, tons of other stuff that, as I look back, I realize how problematic my neighborhood was. It's much better now. I say it's much better, and we had 3 shootings over the last 2.5 weeks. And I'm saying it's much better than it used to be, to things I didn't even process as problematic, where now, if I had a kid and I had them in that environment, I would be terrified. Where, my whole entire community was built on a landfill. They filled it in. Houses are sinking. And I grew up with activists like Carol Brown. Miss Carol Brown, she passed away last year, driving around with a bullhorn around the community to let people know of a community meeting about foundation and cleaning up because the town didn't want to take responsibility. The elected officials wanted to hush it, and we got most of the area remediated. And even still to this day, it took a decade after I was born to finally have them do the work. When I went to my junior prom, the day I stepped out of my house, they were knocking down my childhood house because I had sunk to the ground so much that it was a hazard. Now, as a councilman, I fought for Hartford to get funding for the area, where 2 decades after this fight, there's still 20 or 30 homes that are still sinking into the ground. So,
and why did that? I think maybe if I went through that, just to not to bring myself into it, maybe I would have been like, you know what, politics stinks, politicians stink. You seem to have gone the other way. How did that happen?
I still believe that. Don't misunderstand me. I had a hard experience in school. My junior year, I got sick with Tourette's, this neurological movement disorder. I was having seizures for a while, for like 4 months, every 2 weeks. I was going to the hospital for a seizure. Fought my school for resources. At one point, the school called. They told me, it's your last day of school. You can't, just go to home in school suspension. You're not in trouble, but just chill out there because we don't want you to get stressed out. Because if you get stressed out, you'll get sick and then you'll end up having a seizure. I was like, I had worked in the special education department as a student for 2 summers, took a disability law book, saw how I was treated and other students were treated from other parts of towns who looked different from me. And I was like, cool, you're trying to violate my rights and you don't want to pay money to educate me. Cool, I'm gonna go to class and that's what it's gonna be. And if you don't want me to come back, that's fine. But I'm telling you today, I'm going to class. They called security, they called the police. Like, cool, I'm not gonna touch anyone. I'm not gonna be disrespectful, but I know my rights. They put me in the back of a squad car. I had a seizure, went to the hospital, spent 3 months on homeschooling, got a disability lawyer from the state, got an advocate from the state, fought my school, and they had to pay for private school for 1.5 years for me. And after having that experience, up until that experience, is like, cool, I only care about marine biology. I care about fish. I care about overfishing. People, we suck. I don't want to be around people. Like, I love people, but I don't want to be around people because we're so messy and problematic and frustrating. And then this experience happened to me. And I was like, no. I read the DSM-4 and diagnosed myself with OCD. I had to push my school. I'm like, you need to pay for funding. I know something's wrong with me.
Yeah, let me just ask you, you had said Tourette's came on your junior year of high school. I mean, you're 26 now, so we're talking about, 12 years ago or so?
Yeah.
How much?
7, 8 years ago.
Okay, so, all right, so this is all pretty fresh. Was it, did you have struggles, and you just mentioned OCD, did you struggle in school before that? Because, I mean, I have a son who, okay.
All my OCD, we knew that I had ADHD from a young age, but like, I remember I read through the diagnostic manual because at the time something was going on with my body and I couldn't figure it out. And like, I know something's wrong with me. I skipped anorexia, I skipped bulimia because I knew I wasn't anorexic, bulimic. I skipped Tourette's, ironically, because I knew it as a cursing disease. Yet only 10% of us say cursing and inappropriate things, which ironically, again, I happen to be the rare 10%. But I skipped Tourette's because like, I don't have Tourette's. And I remember reading OCD. And I was like, oh, this is me. Like, this is me. And then to get tested at Yale at the OCD and Tourette's clinic. And it's like, yeah, you have OCD. Yeah, you have Tourette's. That was the experience for me that I remember.
And like, how, as a young person, how do you sort of navigate, I mean, just socially, to have that weight upon you? That can't be easy. How did you do that? And who was sort of your mentor? Who did you lean on in your family to get through that? I mean, not that you're through it, but how did you?
My family, culturally, my family being from Jamaica, we don't believe in medicines like modern, Western medicine. If I have a headache, I don't take a Tylenol. I don't put crap in my body. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I try to stay away from caffeine. So even initially going to take medication to deal with this was a big cultural difference where it's just like you want to take drugs, like don't let people mess you up and mess with your brain and using all that junk. And it was a hard fight to get that. My family has been very supportive. Now I'll say things like, I'll slap the back off a 7, and my mom's like, cool, pass me the orange juice. And like, and there will be no acknowledgement of what I just said being weird or out there. But initially, it was hard to adjust to. And this was at a time at like 17. I had just gotten to the point in high school where I was like, I'm the man, I'm an upperclassman, like I got credit, like people are respecting me, I'm taking AP classes. I'm like, man, I'm really the stuff. And then I got hit with being sick, and it made me reevaluate everything because now I was having panic attacks, I was taking medications that were making me gain weight. It was a heavy adjustment, and it was through family. And then what really propelled me into activism, when you go to communities and you fight with people, people don't care what you look like, what's going on with you. It's like, cool, you showing up to help union people? Cool, you're a part of the family. Cool, you're showing up to help undocumented people? We don't care if you babble in the corner of the room. Cool, do you. We can't wait to see you at the next meeting. And it's been being part of those small groups that have allowed me to feel comfortable where I can now walk into any room and I forget that I wear the headphones until someone's like looking at my ear and just kind of like staring at me. And I'm just like, do I have something in my teeth? Like, maybe something's on my lips. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I'm the dude who wears headphones. That's why they're like acting all weird.
And I should just point out for anybody not familiar, you wear noise canceling headphones because it helps you. It helps you sort of, and if you didn't have them, it would be the sensory overload.
Facts.
And then, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Just to say, without the headphones, the last time I tried was maybe 4 years ago. If I went a couple of days straight without wearing the headphones, I would go from having 2 or 3 manifestations in a minute to having 24 upwards, where I would just nonstop. At one point, I had self-interest where I was punching myself in the face, where without the headphones, I'm unable to move through the day in a way that I could just do it normally. And with them, it dramatically brings everything down where, I can go days straight doing stuff and like I'll have weird things here and there, but nothing so noticeable that people are like, okay, this guy is out there.
That's pretty amazing. And then you've worked it into a whole logo for your campaign, which is that's pretty brilliant too. So I guess we should probably wrap this up. But I do thank you for coming on and just talking to me with like sort of no script or anything like that. I got to compliment you and George. The fact you guys did that debate where you had 1 minute answers. I thought that was going to be a disaster because it's like usually there's a minute of thanking before they even get to answer a question. So, but I'll just end it with this, or my last question. Like, let's say you win the primary and you make it to Hartford. What would be your top priority as a newly elected lawmaker representing our area?
I think, like I said before, transportation is the key to everything. If we're talking about job development, getting jobs, you need transportation. If you're talking about housing, like if you can't get to affordable housing, you can't get to a place. If you don't have the capital for a car, it doesn't matter if I give you, cheap rent at $800, $700 a month. If it's a mile or two from the bus or from anywhere else, doesn't matter. So transportation is key. You have the Waterbury line, you have the Port of Naugatuck, you have these big staples in the district that are transit oriented. And that is just going to be the main focus where, the valley is a beautiful place. You drive through and you see, between the river and seeing, the mountains and you see the houses on the hilltops. It's a wonderful place. But if you don't drive and you don't know anyone out there, there's no reason to go there. And that's beautiful because it keeps community, but in able to bring in industry, you want people to come to your community. You want them to crave, you want them to be part of it. And that's where public transportation and fixing transportation in general in that area, in this region, that's what's going to save us, because the factory jobs, they're not coming back. Some of the brownfields that have been made, you might not be able to get other businesses in, but there are people from New York and other places that are buying into this community that want to be part of it. So it's just making the infrastructure so that people can say, you know what, I just want to go and look at the river and chill out. And like, I hate New Haven, I hate Waterbury, I hate Bridgeport. I just want to go and take a bus or take a train and go sit and look at the river. Or I just want to sit and, and look at the hills in Naugatuck. That is something that we can do if we build transportation. And that's something that if we don't do, generations are going to be left out. So that's my focus and mindset.
All right, sir. Well, with that, I want to thank you again for coming on there. It was nice talking to you. And I guess I'll see you a primary night, perhaps.
Yes, thank y'all. Safe travels, and I hope you will look more into me, Justin Farmer.
All right, sir. Take care. Thank you.
Bye bye.